Now, how many of you box? Get in touch with us if you do and tell us what you enjoy about it. Because last month, female boxing made history when Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall fought in front of a sellout crowd at the O2 Arena. Not only was it the first ever all-female card in the UK, but it was the first time that two female boxers headlined at a major British venue. Clarissa won. Now, despite this win for women's boxing, 99% of boxers are men, and it's still very much a male-dominated sport. But one woman is trying to change that. She set up an organisation to ensure that women boxers get the same opportunities as the blokes. She hopes to harness the growing appetite for women's sport with the recent successes of women's football and rugby by convincing the BBC to show her all-women lineup. So, in the Zoom corner, live on Woman's Hour, wearing a very beautiful white top, may I introduce to you women's boxing promoter extraordinaire, Susannah Schofield, OBE. How's that for an intro?
Now that's an introduction, isn't it? Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, you're not wearing a white top. You're wearing a very beautiful strappy top. Actually, someone else was up on my screen. How about that? Do you have women doing the... that's an audition, basically. I could come and do the whole commentary.
Definitely. Well, we actually do. We have a female introduction introducer who's in the ring. So that's a fantastic thing to be able to have. So yeah, we try and change it all up.
Now, Susannah, you were a very successful businesswoman. So why did you go into boxing and decide to promote this sport? Where does your passion come from?
Well, I think I've always championed women. And I think for me, not so much, I've always said it's right person, right job. Absolutely. I don't really want to see quotas. I want people to get there onto their own merit. And I think as we move through society, I've got two children, two girls, they're 14 and 12. And I believe they can do and be whatever they want to be. But actually, it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what they believe. So as long as I instill that with them, then we're in a good place. But I think in the boxing world, as you say, it's still predominantly male. So I came from 20 years at Royal Mail in a commercial career there, managing mostly men, working with mostly men. Never felt it was a hindrance, which I know I'm very lucky about. But I feel in women's boxing, there's not the safeguarding there and the well-being, and there's not the research to protect them. It's very simplistic things like the British Boxing Board of Control belt that's at a certain height beautifully protects a gentleman's crown jewels, but actually can damage a woman's ovaries. But we've not got enough research and insight into that. So part of setting up, the platform where women can gather together is to make sure we can champion well-being, make sure we can look after safeguarding, and make sure we can deal with some of these really big issues like menstrual cycles. How does that affect boxing? How does that really affect our hydration and the levels? Because it is an inherently dangerous sport, as all elite sports are. But for some reason, boxing still isn't really normalised. We're very happy to talk about judo and karate with women, but actually when we say women boxing, there tends to be that sort of, oh, really? Do women box? And this assumption as to what it is. And I think we're 10 years into the Olympics now. We missed the 2008, only got in 2012.
Yeah,
when Nicola
only 10 years. It was only in 20, yeah, which is telling in itself, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And still so much more needs to be done. But I think what's lovely is if you go back a decade, there was probably only one girl in a gym fighting her way to be part of the boxing community. Now it's completely mixed. Boxing is the biggest growing domestic sport for women. And I think more importantly than just the professional side of things, I think actually there's some huge amounts of research to back up that if you have mental problems, if you have, if you're really suffering with your well-being, if you've got trauma in your life previously, then actually by being able to go and box, you can release serotonin in your brain that enables you to control some of your emotion and to talk better about it. So I think there's so much good that can come from the sport. It's, it's my job, I believe, as the only licensed female boxing promoter to go out there and champion in these amazing women.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, there's nothing better than getting it all out onto a punching bag. And lots of women do, as a sport, as a fitness. What impact did Nicola Adams' success at the 2012 Olympics make to the sport?
I think it was huge. And I think, I mean, before her, there were some credible women that paved the way. Jane Crouch was the first licensed boxing promoter, and she fought from 94 to 2007. And she really did lead the way to make it acceptable. But to then get it into the Olympics and for Nicola Adams to win, I just think it put a highlight on that it's a proper sport, as it were, in inverted commas. But I think now it is about normalising and about getting funding. The government put loads of money into sport in the 2020. After the pandemic, but they didn't put it into boxing.
Why was that, do you think?
I think there's some cynicism around it. It's got its dark moments. There's always issues or potential issues with drugs and etc. And we've had some big fallout of that recently, which is incredibly sad, because those that are focused in the sport and dedicate themselves to it, I think it really needs to be championed, and it does need to be cleaned up. There are some bad elements in there.
And you are very serious about this because you've put your own money behind it.
Absolutely. It's all been privately funded to date, and that's a passion. It's whether my children will agree with that when they don't inherit quite as much, I'm not sure. But I do. But I think for me, I hope now to be able to put real eyeballs on this and to have some corporate sponsorship, because the Lionesses did incredibly well and they got the first 6 or 7 pages of most newspapers. But most of those companies still actually only fund male sport. They still actually only give the money to the Premier League when they advertise. So we love to watch women's sport. It's growing enormously. And I just think now it's my job as a promoter to challenge corporations to say, if you're going to sponsor, you need to sponsor the women's sport as well. We're here. We're doing really well.
What do they say to you? When they say, I'm sorry, no? Is it because they just don't think there's enough people watching it?
Yes, to start with, I think that's where it was. But I think this last year's really, really changed that, Anita. I really do. I think that now people are looking and they are seeing, and the Lionesses did that incredibly well. The rugby's great. The fact we've got Formula One, W1 drivers now, there's a whole build-up of it. But where I think boxing is so interesting is it's such a dynamic sport to watch when women fight, because, you do get journeymen in the ring and there's not quite the depth yet for journey women. And as important a part as they play, because they help train the next generation coming up and they help teach new professional fighters. Actually, women psychologically get in genuinely believing they're going to win. So it tends to be, they're not getting in just because they're a professional boxer. They're getting in to win. And psychologically, we're programmed that way. So it's very interesting to see 2 women going 2-minute rounds, fast and furious. It's a very, very different sport to watch, but it's incredibly entertaining.
That's fascinating. So the psychology is different. They're going in believing they can win. What other aspects of boxing, women's boxing, makes it different to men? Where else do they show more prowess?
Well, I think the 2-minute rounds keep it really fiery, and actually women dehydrate faster than men. So it's important that we do that. But again, we need more research around this. And I think one of the interesting things is we've been working with a company who produces gum shields that have chips in them. And that gives real-time information, so that actually if you're on the side of the ring, you know how hard the head hit was, etc. So for a woman, it's very dangerous for her head to go at an angle. And our rib cage is very different because we have children. Our skull is differently shaped. So all of that information we can real-time send to the coach and their trainer in the corner. We also, when we were televised last time for the show, we managed to share that with the viewers. So we could actually say that's the equivalent of being hit. It's proper punch stats, but that are actually recorded. And for me, if you've got a woman in sparring, and because we do dehydrate faster because of our breast tissue and because of our menstrual cycle, it's incredibly important that if you've taken a blow to the head in sparring, you know how hard that was and you can give yourself enough time to rest. Yeah. So that technology, the British Boxing Board of Control were great to allow us to use it for the first time in a professional fight. And I'm going to really champion in this moving forward. I think there's the technology is there, call it VAR for boxing if you want, but I think it's super important.
I mean, you're obviously remarkable in many ways because you kind of you're championing yourself in the business world, and you became a director at Royal Mail, and then you've stepped into this new world of promoting boxing. What challenges have you faced as a female promoter within the industry?
Do you know, everyone actually has been incredibly welcoming, and not in every industry where it's like this. I think that's not always the case, but where I feel in boxing is it's one of the only sports, if not the only sport, that it doesn't matter what weight you are as long as you're healthy, doesn't matter what size you are, you can always find a weight category to fight in, doesn't matter whether you're a male or a female, and it doesn't matter the colour of your skin. For me, it's one of the very, very few sports in the world that has absolutely no racism in it whatsoever, and there's no room for that either. So I think coming in, it's an incredibly diverse mix of people already, and actually they've been welcoming. I think being taken seriously to start with was probably an issue. We had to sign the girls. We really had to go out there and show that they could fight. We've put on 3 fights now that have been televised, and they've all had amazing write-ups. The last one on the BBC. So, you know, we're really there, and we're moving the business forward. And I think for me, it's that moment of making sure that we're credible. We don't have the room now to move and to change all of that. We have to keep absolutely focused and show that this is a credible sport, and keep pushing.
And there's enough young women coming up through the ranks of the sport.
There really are. And I think it's a shame, because there is some noise now as to whether the boxing will make the Olympics. I believe they've approved it for 2024, but I think there's some questioning whether it will be around in 2028, which I think will be a real crying shame. But there's some movement within boxing, obviously lots of us campaigning to keep it there. But the wealth of women amateur fighters now that will come out as professional afterwards is incredible. You know, we had a great success this last Olympics. So there's a huge number of women coming in now, so it's only going to get a better sport.
Yeah, and a very powerful woman at the helm in the form of you, Susannah, who's promoting it. I really want you to share this story about getting your OBE with us, though, as you are on Woman's Hour, because I read this and I thought our audience need to hear this. What happened the day you went to get your OBE?
Well, it's great, isn't it? Because you dress up and you get on a train to commute into London. So it was an incredible surprise to get it. But you commute into London completely overdressed, and you have to wear a hat. And I've got my 2 children with me who were 5 and 7 at the time. So we're walking down the Strand, and there was a gentleman stood to the side of the Strand, and obviously everyone's looking. And he turned to my children. He said, "Oh, wow, this is amazing. Yeah, I know where you're going. You're off to the palace because it's Order of the British Empire Day." And then he knelt down in front of my youngest and said, "What's Daddy done to deserve this?" And my youngest put her shoulders back and looked at him and said, "Daddy's done nothing, Mummy's the clever one." And I felt incredibly bad for my husband, but I was like, yes, Mummy is, let's go.
I love that. What a great answer. And also, because we're talking about father-daughter relationships, how did your husband react?
Do you know, he's brilliant, and he has been the most supportive of my career. He really has, and my dad has as well. Like, I couldn't come on here and have this and not say to him, how great my dad has been. And I think they've championed, and echoing what was said earlier, genuinely believed I could do anything, completely supported me, both my husband and my father. And I think as a result of that, it makes you invincible, and it does. It gives you a protection that you kind of feel that you can put that jacket on and go out and face everything. So yeah, some amazing men in my life who've really helped me move forward.
Brilliant. And Susannah, I'm sure you've inspired quite a few of our listeners this morning as well. Thank you so much.